How is it possible that a collection of non-living atoms, the same stuff that makes up rocks and water, can come together to think, to feel, to actually be aware? For more than a century, this has been one of the deepest mysteries in all of science. But today, we're going to look at a brand new theory that finds the answer not in philosophy, but in chemistry. All right, let's get into it. Here's the plan. We're going to start with that classic puzzle, look at why our usual scientific methods have kind of hit a wall, and then we'll explore a new state of matter that might just hold the key to understanding where the self and cognition actually come from.
So, first things first, let's really wrap our heads around the problem. This isn't just some tricky little question. It's a huge paradox that has stumped some of the greatest scientific thinkers in history.
I mean, this is the big one, right? If we and every other living thing are just complex arrangements of physical stuff, chemicals and atoms, where does the mind come from? How do you get subjective experience, thoughts and feelings, from a bunch of objective particles?
This quote from Nobel laureate Max Delbrück just says it all. He thought the question itself was almost absurd. It's like it just didn't make sense with everything else we know about the physical world. It felt impossible.
And here's where it gets really interesting. We're not just talking about the super complex human brain here. This mystery, it goes all the way down to the simplest forms of life imaginable. Scientists now know that even bacteria can sense their environment, they can respond, they can communicate, and they can even make decisions. It seems like cognition was there right from the very beginning.
So the fact that even bacteria have a form of cognition, well, that points to a massive hole in our scientific picture of the world. Let's take a look at why our most trusted scientific method has, so far, completely failed to give us an answer.
For centuries, science has had this amazing trick called reductionism. You want to understand a watch, you take it apart. You study the gears, the springs, the little pieces. And it has worked wonders for physics and chemistry. But when we try to apply that same logic to life, we just hit a wall. And here's the really crazy part. We have the complete parts list for a living cell. We know all the proteins, the DNA, the lipids. We know them in incredible detail. But we still can't explain how all those parts come together to create the experience of being alive. It's like we have every single ingredient, but we're totally missing the recipe.
Okay, so if breaking life down into its individual parts has failed us, what's the alternative? Well, maybe the answer isn't in our method. Maybe it's in our basic understanding of matter itself. What if life isn't built from the kind of stuff we thought it was?
It turns out nature has two totally different ways to make things that last. The first one is what we call the thermodynamic path. It leads to static, low-energy stability. A rock is the perfect example. It's stable because it's just sitting there, at rest. But there's a second path, the dynamic kinetic path. This way creates persistence through constant energy flow and activity. And that second, much more active path, well, that leads us to a recently recognized state of matter that might just be the missing piece of this whole puzzle. It's called dynamic kinetic stability, or DKS for short.
So what is DKS? Basically, it describes systems that should, by all rights, fall apart. They're unstable, and yet they persist. How? They do it by constantly pulling in energy and materials from their environment just to maintain their form. They're stable because they're active, not because they're at rest.
I love this analogy because it makes it so clear. Think about a puddle of water. It's thermodynamically stable. It's just sitting there. But now think about a water fountain. It's also stable. It keeps its shape, but it's doing it through constant activity, fueled by a pump. That fountain is in a state of dynamic kinetic stability.
And here is the absolute core of the idea. Every single living thing, from a bacterium all the way up to you and me, exists in this DKS state. We aren't like puddles. We are like incredibly complex, self-maintaining chemical fountains, constantly processing energy and matter just to stay the same.
Okay, so we've established that life is a DKS system. It's a chemical fountain. But how on earth does a purely chemical state give rise to something that seems so non-physical, like awareness or a sense of self?
The first key is this. A DKS system is utterly, 100% dependent on its surroundings. A fountain needs water and electricity. A living cell needs nutrients and energy. If you cut off that supply, the whole system just collapses, instantly. Now, this state of total dependence creates a really profound relationship that isn't just physical. It sets up a distinct inside, the system itself, which is defined by its constant, necessary connection to its outside,
You could think of it like an umbilical cord to the environment.
And this is the big conceptual leap, that inside-outside duality. That's the physical origin of a mental property. A system that is totally dependent on its environment must, by its very nature, be aware of it just to survive. That required awareness is the chemical seed of what we call a self.
But for that tiny seed of awareness to grow into real cognition, you need one more ingredient, the ability to replicate. Why? Because replication kicks off evolution. And evolution, by selecting for systems that can persist longer and better, ends up refining both the physical body and that basic mental awareness at the same time, all to improve survival.
So, where does all of this leave us? Well, this framework doesn't just solve an ancient puzzle, it really opens up an entirely new frontier for science.
What's so powerful about this idea is that it completely reframes one of the oldest questions in philosophy. The whole mind-body problem is no longer just a paradox for us to debate. It becomes a tangible, physical, chemical problem that we can try to solve in a lab.
And what's really remarkable is that this whole idea echoes the deep intuition of Charles Darwin himself. He suspected that the physical body and the mind, what he called corporeal and mental endowments, were never actually separate things. They evolved together, right from the start.
So in this new view, life isn't just matter, it's a dynamic, kinetically stable process. It's this energy-fueled network that's constantly striving to persist, and to do that, it uses every tool it has, its physical structure and its non-physical awareness, which are basically two sides of the very same coin.
And all this leaves us with one final, pretty provocative thought. If we now actually understand the chemical principles that allow matter to become aware, does that mean the path is finally open for us to build a mind from scratch? The challenge has officially moved from the philosopher's study to the chemist's bench.